rest of humanity wish them luck and Godspeed as well.
Welcome back. I have something a little bit different that I want to talk about today, which is a video game soundtrack. For a game to have a real impact, all the sums of its parts have to work together, right? It has to have a good setting. Good action or whatever's going on in the game. And what is essential is a good soundtrack. (1997) was quite a big year in gaming, and movies, and music, of course. Like, it seemed like 1997 was, in some ways, in my opinion, quite a peak year for media. Some notable games that were released in 1997. Final Fantasy VII, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, GoldenEye 007, Gran Turismo, Fallout, Carmageddon, MDK, Tekken 3, Age of Empires, Crash Bandicoot 2, Abe's Odyssey, Tomb Raider 2, Alien vs Predator, Doom 64, Croc. The list goes on. And amongst those games was Quake 2. Movies that were released in 97, Titanic, Men in Black, Lost World, Jurassic Park, Liar Liar, Air Force One, Face Off, Tomorrow Never Dies, and two of my favourites, The Fifth Element and Alien Resurrection. You remember when movies used to be good and exciting and varied in what they do? Anyway, we're not here to talk about movies, we're here to talk about music. I'm not even going to get into the list of albums that were released in 1997 because we'll be here literally all day. Quake 2 was quite successful, and it was ported to many systems, some of which I've never even heard of. The platforms that it was on were Microsoft Windows, Amiga OS, Classic Mac OS, Nintendo 64, PlayStation, Linux, Xbox 360, Zeebo, whatever the hell that is, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Xbox Series S, and BEOS? Again, I don't even know what that is. So this game has been in many, many places and touched many, many different lives. Quake 2 was one of the most important video games for me to ever play. I played a bit of Doom before Quake 2, and really it didn't grip me that much. I think the graphics were just not working for me. Then a few years later, I played Quake 2, and my little mind was blown. I don't even think I would have been a teenager at this point, maybe like 8 or 9 years old. It was obviously before I'd really discovered the kind of music that I want to listen to. So I don't really think I paid that much attention to the music consciously, at least. It was the sound that accompanied the game that I was playing, and I loved this game. I couldn't get enough of it. I played it all the time, Quake 2. In fact, this game made such a big impact on me, I got the logo tattooed on my back. It's quite difficult to get a picture of your own back, but I did the best I could. The soundtrack. I have gone back to, obviously, many times since playing this game back in the day. Something I kind of realized whenever I think of game soundtracks that I really like, this is always the top of my list. There's a bunch of games. Carmageddon TDR 2000 had a pretty decent soundtrack. Early Command & Conquer games obviously have amazing soundtracks. There's so many game soundtracks, I'm not going to list them all. Quake 2 was always like it couldn't be beaten. And there's Doom Eternal and Doom 2016, both have pretty decent soundtracks. But when you sit down and listen to them, because there's so many, they're so long, there's like 50 tracks on the Doom Eternal soundtrack or something like that, it's crazy. The one for Quake 2 has 10 tracks, which is roughly half an hour's worth of music, so it's not, you can sit down and listen to it kind of as an album, which I have done many times. I want to say that it's ahead of its time in terms of its production. The guitar tone that Sonic Mayhem used in this soundtrack is amazing. It hasn't aged a day in almost 30 years. That's crazy. Obviously, I will put examples of this soundtrack in here for you to listen to. In my opinion, a band could release an album with this guitar tone today, and people would be 100% down for it. I certainly would. It took me many years of listening to this album and producing my own music, and obviously using electronic drums and stuff, to realize that this is a drum machine. This isn't an actual drummer. It took me so long to realize that. And it was a huge revelation. I'm like, okay, yeah, of course, this is just a guy making this. It's not a band. But for many years, I just visualized a band playing this music, because it's that, you take it out of the soundtrack, and it is very convincing music, for lack of a better description. It's just fantastic. So yeah, this soundtrack I do listen to often. It's probably the video game soundtrack that not only has made the most impact on me and influenced what I enjoy, but the one that I keep going back to the most over any. There's some game soundtracks that, because of the way they were produced, like the Command & Conquer soundtrack, for example, I know it was remastered, but for me personally, I'm not going to listen to the Command & Conquer soundtrack in the gym, for example, whereas the Quake 2 soundtrack, perfect gym music, because the gameplay of Quake 2 is so brutal and intense that if you get the image of the gameplay from Quake 2 in your head while you're listening to the soundtrack in the gym, it totally works. Whereas something like Command & Conquer, for example, there's a lot of thinking in that game and a lot of like strategic planning and everything, obviously, and that doesn't really fit the gym, but Quake 2 100% does. This is something I only learned from researching this video. The main Quake 2 theme was composed by Bill Brown and Rob Zombie, which I never knew, but it sort of makes sense. It's definitely Rob Zombie-ish. I haven't really covered video games on this channel, because it's not a gaming channel, it's a music channel, but I have hinted at the fact that some albums remind me of specific games, and it's because I played a lot of games when I was younger. I don't really play that many games anymore because lack of time, and honestly I kind of feel like I'm done with that part of entertainment. Basically the only game I regularly play anymore is a mod of Command & Conquer Red Alert 2 called Mental Omega, and I go back to that very often, but I'm not really interested in modern games at all. When I was younger, I came to the conclusion that I would refuse to become one of those miserable old bastards that just listens to the same music they listened to in their formative years for their entire life. I'm like, no, I'm going to keep pursuing music. There's got to be more interesting stuff coming out as I age, right? And so I have done. I have kept up with a lot of modern music. I do still listen to the stuff I listened to when I was growing up, but I feel like I'm an old man in terms of gaming, because I love old games. There was so much experimentation and weird and wonderful stuff that did work and didn't work. And now modern games, the whole modern gaming industry is very cynical. And in my opinion, 2005 was when gaming peaked, because that was just before consoles were able to get online. Like the days of sitting in front of a TV with your friends, passing controllers around and playing against each other and stuff, those days are so far behind us now, and it's really depressing that now everyone just sits with a headset on in front of their computer and just everyone's isolated in their own space playing games rather than it being like a group fun thing to do. And that's very sad. And, you know, let's not get into monetization and loot boxes and all that side of things. I hate it. I hate all of it. It puts me off, and it puts me off gaming at large, because that's how the industry works now. And day one patches and all this crap. Going back to Quake 2, let's try keep it on topic. Going back to Quake 2, I did used to play Quake 2 on PS1 split screen. It actually worked really well. And of course had the soundtrack accompanying it, and it was such a wonderful experience playing on a little CRT with probably like this much screen representing each player's field of view. But it was so much fun and irreplaceable with you know, online gaming. I've never been much of an online gamer. Anyway, I'm really struggling to keep this on topic. This soundtrack kind of changed my life, honestly, because at the time when I played this, like I said, I hadn't really discovered any music that I wanted to listen to. I hadn't reached that point in life yet. But this soundtrack accompanying this game that did blow my mind, I guess subconsciously put this thing in my mind of like, this is cool, this is fun, you are enjoying this. It still to this day never got boring. I love the tone of it and the vibe of it. Obviously there's no lyrics or anything to go into, thankfully, because that would just pour a mountain of cherries on an already established cake. It's a weird metaphor, but anyway, I love the soundtrack. I love it so much. I love the game. I love Quake 1 was good, but it didn't grip me anywhere near as much as Quake 2, and I did play that afterwards. But that soundtrack by Trent Reznor, also very good, but very different. And then Quake 3, again, as I've said, I'm not much of an online gamer, so Quake 3, just a big disappointment to me. I thought the guns were crap, the soundtrack was mediocre, in my opinion. Quake 2 was just like the perfect game with the perfect soundtrack. Beefy, chunky, industrial, metally, machiney, monstery, brah. And I loved it, and I still love it today. And it's my favorite soundtrack of all time, and it kind of defined music that I would enjoy later, I think. It planted a seed in my mind of what I like, without me even realizing. So, a shorter video, but I really wanted to talk about this album because I think it's great, and even just as an album, even if you never play the game, you can listen to this soundtrack if you're into metal and still appreciate it. It's simple, there's nothing complicated or distracting really, so again, if you're in the gym or something, or I don't know, it just works in so many different contexts, I think. 10 out of 10 soundtrack for me. But that's all. Thank you very much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you're new here, welcome. This isn't a gaming channel, don't be under any illusions. This is a music channel. And if you're subscribed, of course, you already know this. And thank you for being here. I've still not thought of how to end videos yet, so I'm just going to say, go away.